I'm going to repeat questions that I've said many times before, but intermittently need repeating. In every situation, in every interaction, in every relationship, we would benefit hugely if we ask these questions. Or first state, I choose to be loving because whatever, I can, because it works, because it never fails. What would it be like if you were loving? And how would that change the world around you? Do you want to add love to this situation or interaction, or do you want to add fear? Anger is the fuel of every conflict, while love is the seed of joy. So will you add fuel to the fire or plant the seeds of life? Just a reminder of these questions and thoughts. I know a guy whose roommate happens to be his landlord too. And he's loud and rude and stays up late and keeps up this guy who's writing to me. He makes music so loud that this guy goes to sleep, if you can imagine wearing earplugs and headphones. Talks to him all day long, intermittently, never pays attention to whether he's interrupting him. The landlord doesn't, the roommate just talks all the time, and talks to him and talks to somebody who he's on the phone with at the same time. So this guy is endlessly distracting himself with conversations, with music, with, you can imagine what his life is like, doesn't have a job, his parents support him, and so he lives for entertainment. And everybody else's needs are, meaningless. So I asked him, how long have you two lived together? He said about 6 months. So every time your roommate behaved selfishly, this was unintentional on your part, but every time he did that, played music till 2 a.m. and kept you up and spoke to you interrupted you while you were studying and so on, and you said nothing. In other words, you went along with this guy's pathologically selfish behavior. You were unintentionally, but in a very real way, giving him permission to do it again the next time, and again and again. If I slap you in the face and you smile and cooperate with whatever I'm doing, you just gave me permission as though you'd given me a written contract. It's okay if you do it again. We don't realize we do that, but we do. I got an email today from a woman who's been mistreated by her husband from the very first day, and she never says anything about it to him. So he doesn't see that he's doing anything wrong. He's off having affairs and doesn't care and is fathering children here and there. And she just sits by and allows it all to happen and then feels bad about it after she's given him permission to do it. We all do this. People tease us, they bully us, they criticize us, they make demands, and we respond by what? Pleasing them, lying down, as in doormat, or otherwise just allowing their behavior. We give them permission to do it again, and then we wonder why we get irritated when we get fed up, or we wonder why other people keep behaving badly around us. We have a sign on our forehead that says, yeah, go ahead and do whatever you want. And we don't realize that. We were trained to do that from birth. And as little children, we really didn't have a choice. We had to comply. Unwittingly, our parents trained us to be abused as we got older. You continue. I've heard you teach this before on a chat about the people pleaser. We give people permission to keep doing something if we, by inaction, allow them to do it even once. So because I did interact with him when he's on the phone and talking to me at the same time, from the beginning, he automatically thinks that I don't have a problem with it. I finally see this. Good for you. You continue. This idea about giving permission to people to behave badly toward you in a certain way by not saying or doing anything in response to their undesirable behavior is huge. Yeah, it really is. If you listen to victims whine about how people treat them, invariably, you'll also hear how they give people permission to keep doing it. He gave other examples about how people have walked on him, and then he eventually blows up. And he's now in the process of learning to stop this. His roommate doesn't interrupt his conversations anymore. For example, past a certain hour, he doesn't play music that can be heard past. They've come up with a system. They actually use a sound meter. If you allow it, it's going to continue to happen. And we don't have to allow behaviors that hurt us. We don't, even though we were trained to. That's different from getting angry toward the people who do this. No, it's just saying we're not going to do this anymore. New subject. In any given day, I usually talk to a great many people. I've learned that the more we think, almost invariably, the more we're afraid and defending ourselves. That's the primary reason we think, is to be thinking about how to get what we want, how to defend ourselves. And either way, we're afraid. We're preparing a defense. It's almost to the point where I would say that when I watch somebody thinking, I will actually say to them, "You're thinking about defending yourself." And they look at me and go, "How did you know that?" Because sure, there are exceptions. If I'm in the middle of doing a mathematical calculation, this may not apply, but thinking is defending. Thinking does not produce joy. Love does. Thinking produces a defense. Now, ironically, there are many people listening to this right now who are thinking of exceptions to what I just said. In other words, they're proving my point. They're thinking, they're defending themselves. Their response to thinking as defending is to think and defend. I promise you there are people who are doing it as I speak. And then, to go further, there are some people who are defending the fact that they're doing that. And yes, I'm talking about you. The one who's now really uncomfortable. We think and defend ourselves so unconsciously and so often that we really, really don't recognize it anymore. All day, I talk to people who defend themselves. Sometimes I point it out right while they're doing it. And they immediately say, no, or but. In fact, it's almost like a mean trick to say to somebody who is defensive, you're always right. You're never wrong. And their next word is utterly predictable, or no, or but. And in other words, when I tell them they're always being right, then they respond by being right. I recognize that there are exceptions to thinking, being defending. If you're building a bridge, you need to think. If you're calculating mathematically, you need to think, yes. But that's a task. When it comes to our personal lives and relationships, all the joy, all the yield, all the product, everything you've been looking for all your life is about feeling, not thinking. Another way that we overthink is to overtalk. It's pretty much a rule that I share with people who do this regularly. The more words we say, one, the less we understand the subject. That's why we use so many words. We can't distill it. And two, the more we're trying to be right, generally speaking. If you find yourself overthinking with spinning thoughts, consumed in thoughts, lots of ways to say that, you're afraid and you're thinking of ways to protect yourself. Consider talking to somebody who knows you and can love you. See what happens when you feel different. See what happens when you ask somebody to point out that you're overthinking, when you point out that you're over talking. It's miraculously more effective to feel than to think. New subject. A woman writes about her daughter, Lisa, who was raised before the mother knew anything about real love and is now a young teenager. Lisa learned early on how to manipulate her parents for everything. I mean, it's reflexive on the part of a child. Children watch their parents' faces eagerly, and they watch, and if they do something that produces a smile, well, they're not stupid. They're at least as smart as seals who learn this trick. If it produces a smile, they do it more. If they learn that if they behave a certain way, they get more of what they want, well, then they learn to behave that way. Lisa learned early on how to manipulate her parents for everything. Whining to get stuff, snotty to get them to back off when they're trying to get her to change her behavior. She had everything she wanted. All the free time she wanted, no responsibility, entertainment, vacations, the latest cell phone each month. Every time there was a cell phone commercial, the parents would just go ahead and, dial the cell phone service and get a new phone because they knew that was next. Transportation to everywhere. This girl lived an absolutely pampered life. And this is pretty common stuff. And she just got snottier by the month. It was just getting worse and worse. And mom wanted to know what to do. So you got to start somewhere. So I taught her how to teach her daughter gratitude, which she did by reading with her daughter. This is a teenage daughter. She can read with her mother, reading the sections on gratitude by using the index in the parenting book and by using the master index, which is on the website. She just looked up gratitude and they read articles and blogs and watched video chats together. It didn't take. Now, sometimes it does. I don't ever have an expectation about whether a particular behavior will work, but this didn't take. The daughter was still entitled and just learned to be extra snotty when she was taught so that mom would back off. So if anything, it was probably counterproductive. Mom told me about her latest trip to school where Lisa sat there. This is in the car on the way to school. And Lisa sat there not listening to anything her mother was saying, like as in, this isn't just, vacant mind not paying attention. This is like turning away from mom as though there was a brick wall between them and intentionally just kind of going up yours as she sat there in the seat next to mom. She was texting. She was making disapproving noises right and left as her mother was trying to talk to her. Come on, you've all seen this in kids. There's not paying attention, like, that vacant look of I'm on drugs. And then there's that look of that snotty thing, which I could imitate for, I don't know, at least 60 seconds. So she's refusing to engage her mother. Mom said, what do I do in a situation like that? And I talked to mom. I said, if she isn't stopped every single time she's ungrateful, every time, she won't take it seriously. If you stop a child 50% of the time, they figure that they just as well be playing roulette in Vegas. It's gambling. She won't take you seriously. So you need to tell her that before you embark on your zero snottiness and zero ingratitude trial. You can call it that. You can say, this is a trial, like a trial run, or experiment, if you'd like. The first time you describe this to her, zero snottiness and zero ingratitude, she's going to have no idea what you're talking about. None. She will not believe you. It will not change her behavior. In fact, when children have been entitled long enough, the only thing that changes their behavior is the consequences of their choices. More teaching doesn't do any good. You've already tried more teaching. So an example, you're headed somewhere in the car, like today, on the way to school, and she's being snotty. Okay, you've already tried words, so don't use more words. You simply turn into the next driveway and you turn around and go home. At first, she's not even going to notice that you've changed direction. Oh, but she will. She's going to start noticing we're not on the way to school. Just do it. Then eventually she's going to say in a snotty voice, well, where are we going? She's going to notice she's not headed to school. And you tell her that there is nothing more important. You will have told her this before the zero snottiness trial. There's nothing more important than learning life. That's the name of a course, by the way, just like geometry, algebra. It starts with a capital L. If you look in the course outlines for courses at university, when they say Advanced Geometry 306, it's capitalized. Advanced Geometry. This is capitalized. There's nothing more important than learning life. And she's not paying attention. You tell her that. This is the most important course you're ever going to take, more important than school, and you're not paying attention. So you tell her that there's no sense continuing with any other education until she gets this class, life. Like, school. She's going to miss school that day. She is. It doesn't matter what she says. Oh, boo, tears running down her face. I agreed to meet my friend at lunch, and she's going to have some really great reasons. Well, there's a test today, blah, blah, blah. Oddly, she's never cared there was a test before, but she's going to on the day you don't go to school. So she's going to miss school. She's going to lose her cell phone, whatever other consequences you've chosen that will enable her. You're going to remove all the things that would just enable her entitlement. So you're going to go home to have life school. Not kidding. And you decide what that is. You could watch parent videos that include parenting. You could show her this one. You could read sections out of the parenting book. You can do whatever it takes until that snotty look disappears. If that means she has to repeat that year in school, by the way, I've done this with parents, then it's worth it. How many adults do I know who are snotty, entitled, controlling, right, do well at everything, and have absolutely no relationships and no joy in their life because no parent had the guts to teach them life? But you're going to. If you did this, she's going to pay attention. Kids do. You don't realize that every time she's snotty and you say nothing, we've kind of made reference to this earlier in this chat, you're giving her permission to act like that. And she's gotten away with it so many times. She feels absolutely entitled, and she thinks of you as a servant. And as you talk about her, it's pretty clear that she does. She thinks that your teaching is a joke. She won't now. When she starts having things removed that she likes, and we've talked about consequences before, and we will again, you need to have a list of consequences that you start applying. No kidding. So you turn the car around and she speaks to you snottily, and you just reach over and you take the phone. If she won't give you the phone, then you disconnect the phone. You call the service provider and you cut off her service. If she continues to act snotty, you go, that'll be another day at home, a day where she doesn't go and visit friends. She keeps it up. You create the list. In the parenting book, there's bunches of them. You just simply go to the garage and get a pair of pliers and remove the hinge to her door, and now she has no privacy at all. Keep going. And you tell her, I'm going to keep going till you get this, so I'm not going to get tired. That's the scariest phrase I've ever seen make a difference with children. So listen to what I'm saying. I'm going to keep applying consequences, and you're going to get tired before I do. What do they hear? I mean it. That's what they hear. You've never meant it before. There is nothing more important than life school. So until she starts learning, what you're doing is really just, you're being very kind. It's going to look mean to her. She's not going to say, oh, Mom, thanks for teaching me life school. But you're removing all the distractions from life school. That's all. She won't see it in the beginning, but eventually she will. I've done this with many kids. And if the parents have the guts, it works. Most parents don't. Most parents give in to the kid. The kid rules the house. I was talking to a CEO of a company one day, and he said, we just don't know what to do. Our household is just ruled by this child with his screaming tantrums and demands, and I want this and I want that, and none of us get enough sleep. Everybody's stressed. I don't know what to do. This guy's a CEO of a company. And I said, how old's your child? 4. This 4-year-old child is the parent of the household, rules the home. Well, by the time they get to be 14, it turns out they've acquired a whole lot more skills, and it gets way worse. Every parent who's listening needs to understand how important these lessons are. A snotty child isn't just annoying. These kids grow up to be entitled and ruin everything. Relationships, friendships, job, children. We think that they're just a problem. No, it's not just a problem. It destroys their lives. And then later, when they have no life, we are oddly mystified. And we show all this apparent concern. I'm so concerned for my child who is, and I hear this one pretty regularly too, in jail. How did this happen, they say. And sometimes I say, is that a genuine question or is it rhetorical? Because if you're really asking how your child got in jail, I can tell you exactly how your child got to jail. So you can learn now how to prevent that, or you can ask me the question later and I'll answer the question, at which point there's pretty much nothing you can do. I know, pretty serious subject, huh? Let's go to a new subject. A woman said to me that sometimes she gets afraid of making a mistake, afraid of doing something wrong in her personal life and in her relationships. Understandable. Most people are afraid of making mistakes. She teaches violin. So I asked, what if you had a student, violin student, stand in front of you, getting ready to play a piece, doing absolutely nothing but holding the violin in one hand and the bow in the other. I'm a little light on violin technique, so, shoot me. I'm pretty sure you hold the violin in your left hand and bow with the right. If you're left-handed, does that change? I don't think so, because of the way the strings are set. So the student stands in front of you, the teacher, holding the violin and the bow, crying and saying, I can't move because I'm afraid of making a mistake. What if that actually happened? And she said, well, that actually has happened. And she said, that would be the worst possible mistake, to not try at all, because that student will never learn anything about the violin. And I said to her, it's the same for you. Way better to make mistakes, to make lots of mistakes, than to avoid making any. If your goal is to not make mistakes, you're not going to have a life at all. New subject. Caleb called, and he was saying that he was unhappy at work. Said his boss treated him differently, was the word he used. My boss treats me differently from the other employees. And I said, how? He said, well, more formal, more stiff than he treats his coworkers. And Caleb was clearly blaming the boss for being uneasy around him. And I told him that's the word I would use. If he's being formal and stiff around you, he's feeling uneasy, uncomfortable around you. And Caleb was blaming the boss for that. I said, you're afraid almost all the time. And so you're afraid at work too. That's not hard to suppose. I'm not there, but if you're a continuation at work of who you are elsewhere, you're generally afraid. And he acknowledged that, yeah, that was probably true, which means it is true. Your fears make your boss uncomfortable. You want to make somebody uncomfortable? Be afraid. It spreads like a fire. It's a communicable disease. So your fear makes your boss uncomfortable. Then he's uneasy. Then you are more afraid because he treats you differently. And then he's more uneasy. You see the cycle. In short, your fears start the whole thing. That's the first lesson. If we're afraid, other people get afraid, and this cycle begins and usually continues. Well, Caleb didn't especially like that answer because what he wanted to do was to blame his boss, which is what most of us want to do. But can you imagine how fruitful would it be for him to blame his boss? Imagine him walking into his boss's office and saying, I demand that you be more comfortable when you're around me. And yet we do this kind of thing with other people all the time. We blame them, which implies that there's in some way we could make a demand that they'd be different and our lives would be happier. No. So he didn't like the answer that I gave him about his boss. So then he began to blame conference calls, that he was uneasy on conference calls too. And then suddenly he began to blame me that he was uneasy on the call we were having. I asked him what he was doing about his fears. He said, well, like what? I said, well, I've answered what you could do about your fears easily 100 times. The website lists hundreds of things you could do about your fear. You're not doing them. That's the second lesson. If you don't do something about your fears, they're going to continue and usually get worse because you'll spread them to the people around you. Caleb was raised in a family where he didn't have to do anything. No chores, no cleaning, this is kind of a different subject. I'm changing the subject a little bit. No cleaning, no bed making, no laundry, no nothing. And I said to him, you don't know how to work. It's simple. You've never had to. But now you do have to. I can't do your emotional work for you. One of the reasons that you blame everybody, so I sort of changed the subject and sort of didn't, we're tying them together. You blame other people because you expect them to do the emotional work for you. Just like your mother picked up your socks and did your laundry, you expect everybody else to do your emotional laundry. Remarkably, he heard that. He listened. He's doing his work. He left me a video message the other day, possibly the first one I've gotten. I'm a little, primitive when it comes to electronics. He left me a video message saying that not only is he lazy and irresponsible, but he says, I'm incredibly blank, ungrateful too, which is true. He was listening. So he contacted more people. He got more love. He remembered the love he did have. He stayed more grateful. He became less fearful around everybody, including his boss at work. And his boss now does not treat him differently from other people at work. Wow. So he had a problem at work, and where was the solution? Him, which is true with all of us. New subject. All of our lives, we were taught to be nice. Oh, I've heard that expression from parents so many times. Be nice to your brother, be nice to your sister, be nice, be nice, be nice, be nice. If you can't say anything nice, adults even say this to each other. If you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. Or we hear, oh, well, that's not nice. All variations of be nice. We've all heard this. It sounds, forgive me, nice, But very often it's not. We've confused niceness with loving. When this comes to our children, it can actually be deadly, not just not nice. And I'm not exaggerating. So we are nice to our children because we're too afraid that if we love and teach them, which often means that we'll tell them things they don't want to hear, then our children will think that we are not nice. And boy, will they be vocal about it. You're not being nice to me. And I've watched parents hundreds of times then modify their behavior so that the child likes them. We're terrified of not being seen as nice by everybody, including our kids, all the while allowing our children to learn principles and behaviors that can destroy them. I know a mother who had a child who screamed every time he needed to have his diaper changed. I mean, just screamed bloody murder. And the father, she just insisted that the child have the diaper changed, did whatever it took, manhandled the kid, wrestled him. It was, like doing that roping thing they do with steers in a rodeo. She just changed the kid's diaper. The father told her that she was being cruel, that she was not being nice. So what was his solution? Instead of wrestling the child on the changing table and changing the diapers, I can still hardly tell this story because it was so funny to me the first time I heard it. He tied black plastic garbage bags to this kid's legs. Not kidding. Taped them to the kid's legs so that the poop, forgive me, I mean, what else could it be, would fill up the diaper, roll down the diaper, and fill the bags so that he wouldn't have to change the diapers. But what happened was that the kid dragged bags of poop all over the house, tore the bags, fell down a lot. So we had a house that had poop everywhere this kid had been. Mother would come home and just have a fit because this would happen when she wasn't there and Dad didn't have the courage to be not nice. She asked about what to do. I said, this is really easy because I've done this many times before. You take your pick, straps, rope. You tie first the right hand. There's a poem that sounds like this. Put your right foot in, your right. Yeah, we could do this about changing diapers. Tie the right hand to the corner of the changing table, then the left hand, then the left foot, then the right foot, and change the kid's diapers. She added another one because the kid would flop his knees back and forth. So she tied his hands, feet, and knees to the changing table. This sounds not nice. Oh no. I've used this example before. Raising children is like raising a goose, or it's like picking up a goose. The most geese are very strong. The most unkind thing you can do when you occasionally do have to pick up a goose and put it somewhere else is to pick it up nicely, meaning gently, uncertainly. They will then flap their wings just as hard as they can and can hurt you and can break their own wings. No, if you're going to pick up a goose, you reach down and you just seize it by both wings, not crush it, hurt it. We're not breaking ribs here. And as soon as you seize a goose, because I've done this, the goose just goes, it's like instant sleep, just funniest thing. Like watching a child who's being told that he needs to go clean his room. Picking up a goose firmly is the nicest thing you can do. This mother tied the kid's knees and hands and feet, and as soon as the child couldn't move, the child just went and became gentle. And the mother changed the child's diapers, and they were singing together and having a great time. And the diapers were changed, and then she just undid the ropes, and she left the ropes there for the next time. And the kid just ran off just as happy as could be. And eventually she didn't have to use the ropes at all. The kid just knew that changing diapers is what you have to do. Whereas the nice approach, which really isn't It's indulgent is what it is. Taught the kid that he was in charge. It's loving and teaching that changes kids' lives. It's loving and teaching that gives them a feeling of security, not nice. Another example. Several years ago, this is an example of niceness, not changing diapers. There was a climbing expedition. Well, there were a number that year, but a couple of them in particular, to Mount Everest. And one man had tried twice before to reach the summit. This was his third attempt, and he acknowledged that he wasn't going to try again. Climbing Everest is just not all that pleasant. It's cold and miserable, and there's not enough oxygen. And both times before, he had failed pretty close to the top and had had to turn around because of storms and daylight and lack of oxygen and so on. So he was motivated to reach the summit. Every guide who goes to the top of Everest establishes a time. They go up in stages. They go to base camp, they go to camp 1 and camp 2 and camp 3, and they finally get to, I think it's camp 4, which is the camp where they spend the night, and then the next day they go all the way to the summit and then head down. And if by a certain time they haven't reached the summit, they have to turn around anyway, because if they keep going, they'll reach the summit. But when they turn around and go to come back down, they'll be trapped by darkness, storms, cold, whatever. So it's the turnaround time. You reach the top by the turnaround time where you don't make it. So they reached the turnaround time. And this man who had tried twice before begged his expedition leader to be allowed to continue climbing to reach the top. He said, I'm only an hour away. It's only that far. And he's only pointing, 100 yards to the top. But at that altitude, 100 yards apparently is just excruciating, sometimes deadly. And in order to be nice, the expedition leader said, okay. Sad. And the man died. And so did the expedition leader. There's a reason for loving. They didn't make it. They made the top. But because the leader had been nice, they didn't make it to the bottom. They died of niceness. I'm not kidding. There's a reason for loving and teaching, and principles and guidelines. These two got caught in a storm, the climber and the leader, and they died from niceness. And our children die from niceness. Not kidding. It's loving and teaching. Boy, that's an important subject. New subject. A woman writes, she says, a year ago, I asked you whether you thought I had what it took to be happy. You told me that I had the native gifts to achieve happiness. Now, all I needed to do was find people to love me and to trust them. She's writing this to me about what our interaction had been a year ago. She said, now, a year later, I want you to know that after you answered me, I began to work at it. Well, how nice to hear, because most people, really, more than 50%, say, what does it take to be happy? I describe what it takes to be happy, and they say, well, I was kind of hoping it would be easier. And so they spend the rest of their lives looking for an easier way, and they die of niceness. They die of easiness. They die of laziness. They die of entitlement. It kills them. These subjects that we talk about on the video chats, they're not interesting. They're life and death. So she said, I began to work at it. I remembered the three-legged stool of feeling loved, being responsible, and being loving. Apparently, she'd seen a video chat or two. I worked on it every day, and gradually, I began to feel the happiness you talked about. It was gradual, but it was real. I'm even feeling peace and freedom. It was like a foreign language to me at first. It was really disorienting. But now I understand. And now I'm happy. Should be on a billboard. I essentially, I followed the laws of happiness, and now I'm happy. This applies to laws pretty much everywhere. I followed the laws of acceleration, and I achieved escape velocity and left the Earth. I followed the laws of physics, and I was able to build a building. I followed the laws of physics and gravity, and I was able to climb a mountain. Everything that is good is governed by law. Everything that fails is also governed by law. Learn the laws. New subject. Somebody sent a metaphor, and because metaphors so rarely work, I'm pleased to share this one. This person writes, sometimes it feels like letting go of pain is like battling insomnia. You get caught in this loop of trying desperately to go to sleep, but you can't because you get hypervigilant, which keeps you awake. You can't control yourself to sleep. You have to let go and fall asleep without any attempt to cling to the sides. Emotions are the same. So many of us are emotional insomniacs, never having experienced true rest. Nice picture. New subject. Sometimes we learn just by doing. A couple once asked me if they were ready for a relationship with each other, and I gotta admit, I'm thinking, yeah, probably not. But let's try something. Why don't you two try being together? Just go ahead. I really didn't think they would succeed, but you try it. You get to know each other, and I make one suggestion, just one. Share with me every single significant conversation you have, and talk to me about every single thing that you do together, not minute by minute, but the stuff that would matter. In other words, be together transparently. I recommend this to everybody who dates. If you don't feel free to share with somebody who knows and loves you exactly what you're doing, you're almost certainly doing something that's not going to work. Well, they did. They made some mistakes, they learned some things, and eventually, as they talked to me about all of it, they became aware. I didn't tell them. They became aware, we're not ready for this relationship. In fact, we've decided to separate and do our own emotional work before we get back together. They decided they weren't ready for a relationship with anybody. I would recommend learning to shoot a gun I would not recommend learning to shoot a gun just by doing. Take your gun out and just learn to shoot by shooting. Now, there are some people who are capable of doing that, but there are some mistakes that you can make that you wouldn't anticipate that would end up killing somebody. And I'm not going to go into all of them. I wouldn't recommend people learn to drive a car by just going out and driving a car on the interstate. I wouldn't recommend that people learn to perform surgery by, just grabbing somebody off the street and trying it. But because these people were transparent, they learned by doing. Share what you're doing and learning with somebody who loves you and has the experience to help you see what you're doing. It's very educational. They did comment that their relationship seemed to be absolutely perfect, that they were meant for each other in the beginning. In the beginning, when people fall in love, who doesn't believe that? Oh, we were meant for each other. God put us together. I've heard that many times. Head over heels in love. And then it got more difficult. Not entirely dissimilar from everybody finds a newborn baby very cute, and then, they get harder. They learn to do things we don't know how to respond to. I told them the story of how I had once gone up in a private plane with a friend, and he gave me control of the stick where I could go up, down, right, left. He just sat back and he said, "Go, you fly." I thought that was pretty cool. And For a moment, actually several moments, I felt like a bird. I could go anywhere I wanted to go. I could go left and right and up and down, and I was just feeling pretty hot. But would I have wanted to do that alone without him there? No, still wouldn't. Don't confuse fun, which is what I was having, with happiness or competence. Don't confuse the initial excitement of a relationship with the ability to have one that actually means something. The initial excitement is no doubt enjoyable, but excitement isn't the same as fulfillment. Having fun isn't the same as loving. To confuse things even further, as though that were needed, in early relationships, there is some unconditional love. This just makes it really confusing. People really do have an innate, inborn, divine, if you like, desire to care about each other. So let's assume that when people fall in love, we're going to just make this up. We're going to pick a mythical couple, or we could pick the couple that came to me. There's 18% real love. We're going to make this up. Actually, that would be pretty generous with most relationships. And 82% imitation love, which is not far off. We feel the real love. We really can feel it. We feel this genuine concern for the other person, but at the same time, we're drunk with the imitation love, and we can't tell the difference. Being drunk is too distracting. When you're drunk, you can't distinguish between, often literally, up and down, walking and crawling, like me in the plane. 18% of me was actually capable of flying the plane. I could do, we're being generous, 18% of the things that a pilot does. Maybe. I could go up and down, and I could go left and right. But would you want me to land a commercial jet where I can control the landing 18%? I don't think so. Not 18% of the time, which would actually be pretty cool. No, just 18% of the ability to land, which would mean that landing, if we landed correctly, it would be purely a fluke. You want to be on that flight? No. And yet we don't hesitate to get on that flight when it comes to relationships. Kind of crazy. We can't distinguish, because we can't distinguish the 18% real from the imitation, and because imitation spreads like a fire, pay attention, while real love requires conscious nourishment, the imitation grows like crazy and becomes 100%. And that's when they fail. The real is now completely crowded out because fear and all the other stuff just grow like a fire, and real love requires nourishment. Then we're doomed. I'm not preaching doom and gloom. I'm just saying, be aware. Not trying to scare anybody, just describing the rules for having a genuinely good relationship. So to one couple, I said, to the one couple that we were talking about, you did feel loved, but you couldn't possibly keep it up. Just like me in the plane. Was I flying the plane? Yes. But could I continue to fly the plane? Not under any difficult circumstances. Not if there were crosswinds. Could I have landed the plane? No. So there's a difference between being able to do some of it and being able to do all of it. And in the case of relationships and landing planes, it turns out, well, you have to be able to do it all. We just need to be more and more aware of what we're capable of. We need to be aware that happiness is governed by laws. We need to be loved and taught. We need to learn how to love and teach our children and others. All of these things, it turns out, are predictable. There are laws of happiness. And as we learn them and as we live by them, we will be happy. If we don't learn the laws, or if we learn the laws and decide that we're an exception, it's not going to go so well. We'll talk more about that next week. See you then.